Hello, welcome back to Retirement Clarity Radio. I am your host, Scott Newhouse. I'm a certified financial planner, the author of 3 books on retirement planning, an all around good guy. I am so glad that you and the dozens and dozens of other listeners have rejoined this podcast. Again, this is just a short weekly podcast trying to help you have a comfortable, fulfilling, stress free retirement. So, today's episode is one that I'm extremely excited about. And we're going to be covering 5 factors before retiring overseas, or 5 things to think about before retiring overseas. Now, personally, I love to travel. I love to travel across the U.S. and nice long road trip. I also love going internationally and seeing what the world has to offer outside of the U.S. So I think this episode's going to be a lot of fun, a lot of things to think about. Even if you don't want to live full time overseas, maybe you want to travel for an extended period of time, which is easier to do now than ever before. So if you're thinking maybe you want to retire outside the US, or if you just want to spend 6 months, 12 months outside the US, this podcast episode's going to be really helpful for you. So let's just get right into it. Retiring overseas can be appealing for a lot of different reasons. Maybe you've always dreamt of living, internationally, or maybe the cost of living in the US has made you think, hey, maybe I can get a better quality of life for less money outside the US. No matter the reason, you are not alone. Over 700,000 Social Security checks are sent abroad. So there are plenty of other people doing this as well, but doesn't necessarily mean it's the right fit for you. So let's get into the 5 things for you to think about before you retire overseas. The first one is really just look at the pros and cons, and I've laid out my own right here. Anywhere that you're going to retire has its pros and cons, but there's really a lot more to consider if you're thinking about leaving the U.S. So let's look at some of the pros. The pros, first one, the biggest one to me is finances. This is usually the number one reason why people want to retire abroad. It is just cheaper to live in most other places, which means your retirement funds can go further. And it simply means that, maybe if you were in a tenuous place with your finances in the US, well, you might have a cushy lifestyle somewhere else. But you can't always assume that's the case. You got to do your own research on your specific location that you're looking at. Second pro in my mind is it's just a brand new experience. Retirement, when you don't have that 9 to 5 you have to report into, it's a time to explore, have fun, and then live the life that you want without being tied down to a job or a young family. Hopefully your kids are grown and gone in your retirement. So if you love new experiences, this could just be at the top of the list of anything that you've done in your lifetime. It really could be an incredible experience. You're also going to push yourself outside of your comfort zone. Not always easy for some of us. I get that. Hey, same with me. But if you're the type that likes to try new things, this could be an entirely new experience that pushes you outside of what you've known for so long. Now, the cons, and it kind of goes into the last pro, but it is really a whole new world. You're going to have to learn new ways of life, how to navigate a new culture, how to navigate a new healthcare system. And then if you had planned to work part-time in retirement, or do something in the US to supplement your income, you have to ask yourself, hey, am I going to be able to do this internationally? Am I going to be able to do this remotely, or maybe am I going to be able to find something part-time locally that I can do to supplement my income, if that's something that you had planned inside the US. Another con is that you might have to learn a new language. Even if you learn the native language of the country, you're probably not going to be as fluent in it as you are in English, and so that could create barriers. I think those are barriers that you can overcome, but you do absolutely have to think about it. And then lastly, and this is probably the biggest one, is you might miss your friends and your loved ones, your friends and your family. Even with today's technology, yes, you can FaceTime, yes, you can Zoom, although, I don't know, some people are getting kind of tired of Zoom. I am as well. But it's just, and that's just not going to be the same as being with them in person. So you really got to think about the family and the friends that you're going to be missing as well. But I would encourage you to come up with your own pros and cons list. This is obviously my own, just thinking about this for my own situation, but you need to come up with your own pros and cons list as well. So the second thing that I would encourage you to do is consider renting first before you pick up all your stuff and move to a new country. Don't buy right away. Please consider renting on a VRBO, Airbnb. There might be other types of platforms where you can rent for a short period of time. You may love the country when you visit, but living there, it's just a completely different dynamic, completely different scenario. So, what if you, after a couple months of living there, you just tire of it? Or you're not comfortable living there. What if after that whole first month you realize things that you never would have realized on a 3-day weekend? So again, if you're making this big move, don't buy right away. Rent first, and I would consider that you rent during the off season when there are fewer Americans around, and the reason for that is you'll get a truer sense of how the area feels and how hard or easy it is to set up your home base there. So take some time to get acclimated and comfortable before you commit to a specific area and buy a home. You may also want to move around to different parts of that country. So maybe that first month you're in one city, and then the next month you're in a different city. And that'll give you a different flavor of what that country offers. And then, of course, maybe you do that for 3 different months, and then you say, boy, I don't really like this country. Hey, great, you've just been renting. No problem. Pack up your stuff. Let's go find a different country or come back to the US. So, again, my second point there, rent first. Don't buy right away. The third thing, and this is really important, is just understand the medical care. If you move outside the US, you're going to have to ask yourself, what's going to happen with those Medicare benefits? Is anything going to be covered, or is it going to, frankly, be completely useless to you? Do you have enough money to set aside to cover medical expenses? Did you discuss your options with your current insurance company? You may be eligible for government supported health care after living in a certain area for a certain amount of time, but you can't assume that. You have to make sure of that. So that's another thing to think about. Most healthcare facilities abroad require some kind of cash or credit card payment upfront, even with insurance. So you got to do your own research and find out what's the healthcare situation is in this new country, and how that factors into your plan. Again, and you probably know this, but if you're by a big metropolitan area, you'll probably have more high quality healthcare options, but you really don't want to wait until you get there to find out. So do your research on what the medical options and costs are for you in this new country that you pick. The fourth thing that you need to do research on is try and figure out what costs are going to increase and what are going to decrease. And that's pretty much like my whole point on this one specific point. You can find the standard cost of living on a lot of great websites of, how much on aggregate does a couple spend in this country. But when you're doing that research, find out what costs are going to be the same as the US, less than the US, and more than the US. So things like housing, insurance, utilities, transportation, food, entertainment, medical/health insurance, etc. So what costs are going to go up throughout your retirement years? What costs are going to go down? The last thing, the fifth thing that I have before you retire overseas, is understand the tax implications. Taxes I think, are already complicated enough in the US, and guess what? They get even more complicated if you move abroad. So you're still going to have to pay the standard US taxes as if you lived here, assuming you keep your US citizenship. So any tax deferred accounts like your traditional 401k or traditional IRA, you withdraw that money after age 59 and a half, you're just going to pay that ordinary income tax. That's just like back at home. So you're not going to be able to get away from that. So the standard things do apply, but you also have to factor in what's the tax implications of the new country that you're living in. Some countries have taxes for all residents that live there, regardless of citizenship. So even if you keep your citizenship with the US, you may have to pay taxes in this new country. So I would encourage you to research what those tax implications are, and then honestly, if you're even just a little bit confused, go find a tax advisor, tax professional in that specializes in working with U.S. citizens in that country, so that you are not surprised with the big unpleasant tax bill. So that's all the 5 things that I think you should consider before retiring overseas. If moving abroad is on your bucket list, it is so easy in this day and age to make it a reality, but you obviously have to do your research first. I've heard this from a number of people. Living, even if temporarily, outside the US, it can be one of the most fulfilling things that you do in your life, but the better prepared you are, the better it's going to work. Now, before you go, and especially before you make any really big decisions in retirement, I want to offer you to get a free copy of my book, 65 Questions to Ask and Answer Before You Retire. So this is a comprehensive view of all of the things that I think you and your spouse should be asking yourselves, and it also offers a guideline of how you can answer each of those specific questions from me, a certified financial planner. So you can get that book at freeretirementbooks.com. Again, that's freeretirementbooks.com, and you'll get my book, 65 Questions to Ask and Answer Before You Retire. So I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope you have a great week. Bye. Thanks again for listening. As a reminder, you should consult with a financial advisor familiar with the specific circumstances of your unique financial situation before making any financial decisions. Nothing in this podcast is a solicitation for the sale or purchase of any securities. Any mentions of rate of return are hypothetical in nature and not a guarantee of future returns. Scott Newhouse, CFP, is an investment advisor representative of Forthright Finances, a California and Nevada registered investment advisor.